Okay, who wants to kick off the work
Let's
session?
get her going.
It's on, so we're good.
Mr. Knoll, would you like to lead off?
Yes. Commissioners, did you all get a copy of the information that was provided for the work session? And you've got extra copies here if anybody would like.
Yep.
Tom, you have yours.
Looks like we do.
Yeah, I got it.
I saw it.
Got the yellow pen out.
Never mind. I didn't take mine. Oh, sorry. Mike, we need one more for Mark. Okay. All right. Commissioners, you currently have the current policy before you. The current policy is the policy on local service roads. This policy covers several topics, including the opening of a new road, the construction of a road in a unmaintained, abandoned right-of-way that still exists, and what a minimum maintenance road is. It further defines what maintenance responsibilities the county does have on minimum maintenance roads as established by the Board of County Commissioners, and how those roads should be applied. That is in Part 4 of this policy. This policy was adopted in 2019. Subsequent to this policy, there were approvals for exceptions to the policy that were granted for the issuance of building permits. There are 3 that were issued on Donahue Road. During the first issuance, there was directive made to the Board of County by the Board of County Commissioners in 2020, I believe it was, or 2021, where there was going to be a affidavit that was generated by the Planning and Zoning Department for residential building permits that acknowledged this policy and the responsibilities of any property owner wishing to provide or request a building permit for their property. Subsequent to that, we have for your review different aspects of what is a county roadway. Currently, the policy on county roadways are all roadways that are developed in the county are hard surfaced, and those standards are set forth in the road construction and stormwater standards. I'll pause there to address any questions you have, or I can continue on.
What were the exceptions? Did you list the exceptions? I was looking for that. Or did you just name them?
There were policy issuances granted for building permits. One was for a 40-acre parcel. 2 others were for 10-acre parcels. Those building permits that were granted on Donahue Road did not go through any formal review process by Planning and Zoning, where they would send that out like a development case to all the reviewing agencies. These were just looked at by the Board of County Commissioners.
So all 3 of those were on Donahue Road, all the exceptions that you found?
No, they were not all on Donahue Road, but there are 3 that were on Donahue Road. There was another one down south, and then one up north.
So total of 5.
So they would have got sent to the fire department or
No, there was no formal review process.
or even emergency management.
They would not have been sent to any emergency services.
Okay.
The other issue that I wanted to make sure the commission was aware of, whether it is an issue or not, is, I guess, at the direction of the Board of County Commissioners. Currently, Public Works, and this was discussed in 2021, does not review off-site improvements for residential subdivision developments. So, as part of the development of a subdivision, there is not a review completed by the Public Works Department or the consultant engineer of the developer regarding the roadway network adjacent to and outside of the residential subdivision. So if there are structures that are adjacent to the subdivision that, say, have 12-ton weight limit bridges or it's a gravel road that's 14 feet wide, or it's a 400 lot subdivision and it's on a roadway that is currently not hard surfaced, but it is adjacent to, say, the city of Basor. There is not a review process like there is with SUPs, where we look at the impact on the existing roadway network. So I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that again here today, that we had discussed it, and at the time the board's direction was that we weren't going to complete that type of roadway impact study on residential development.
How much is the ambulance way build, do you know? Roughly.
I don't know. They changed types, so just like Jamie said, from the van to the new chassis.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure.
I just wondered.
So one of those exceptions that was made was down near the winery down south, right? Was that one of the unmaintained roads?
No, now that I'm
So
aware.
that was just granted.
No, it was not granted.
That was,
How did
you're
that
talking
work?
about an
They just
ag.
did it.
Yeah, they put it in as ag. It's not a residential. It's
Okay, I didn't know how that came about because that was on
Well, the folks
that was on
north-
an unmaintained road.
The folks north of there had to pay to improve the road.
But that okay. So and what year did that happen?
Oh, gosh.
17 or
Oh, that they had paid?
no? What year was it that? That came about?
I don't know. I was still working.
Yeah, that was.
Average ambulance
Fire
weight is between
safety.
5 and 7 tons.
5 to 7 tons. I will state on two of the discussions that were had by the Board of County Commissioners that I personally recall, they were discussing properties that were 40 acres and whether or not an agricultural property.
There weren't actual plats.
None of the properties are plats.
last year.
Okay. I'm talking about that have pulled building permits to date.
Okay.
So I think there's a couple of things, Commissioners. One, per current policy, the improvement of those roads is at the expense of the developer. And since it's our recommendation and has been that they don't allow residential on these minimally maintained roads, the board has granted some exceptions. But something that is different in this case, that the fire district has weighed in on it, stating that they support the development only if the roads can support the emergency vehicles. And obviously on a minimally maintained road, we haven't done any analysis that could happen, and we don't believe that it would. So that's really what has changed in the last year and a half. But it's important to note that, and I think that it's good for them to point that out, the fire district. I don't think it's wrong for them to point it out.
So is it the role of a fire district to determine if development can occur?
Well, it's the role of the fire district to determine
If
the
it's
life
safe,
safety issues that they have in their control.
we're getting people.
But it kind of crosses a line when you start having a fire district dictating whether you're going to have a certain amount of development.
I don't think they dictated that. I think what they said is they support it as long as the road can support.
But we haven't typically been getting these type of letters from fire districts.
But don't they sign an affidavit now saying if they're going to build on a minimum maintenance road, they agree to accept those conditions? Wouldn't that apply to a fire district saying we don't agree with it, but if they want to sign an affidavit saying it's on us, then that wouldn't limit
But you can't.
development?
Yeah, I don't think that's what their email said.
No.
Right.
I think it said they only supported it.
Right.
Another issue at hand is, unlike the typical building permit process, this is a subdivision plat that's going to be signed by the county engineer, albeit a contracted one. There would have to be, for their professional liability, some extensive disclaimer statements placed upon the face of the plat. Now that the fire district has stated the safety aspect that they have concerns with, it is pretty clear that now that we are looking at the exterior roadway as the access point and doing a review based upon their statements, that either we need to state out front on the face of the plat that the roadway was not reviewed in any manner by the reviewing engineer, or the recommendation of an engineering professional is going to be to do some sort of roadway improvement to the roadway in accordance with county policy as it is currently. That is a hard surface roadway that meets our current standards.
To me, there's no difference between a minimum maintenance road, though, and a cross-access easement. It's as far as
Other than it's
as
public
far
right
as-
of way.
One is owned by the county, and so the liability is that of the counties. One is, as part of the covenant agreement, that is a private roadway owned by the individual. So if the fire district comes to a community that's in a cross-access easement plat and says, we will not access your property and we will no longer serve your property until there's a road improvement, it is not the financial liability of the county, it is the financial liability in the situation of the residents of that plat. Where if they come to an area that is in the county and say that we will no longer service you on this county roadway, then that would be the responsibility of the county to bring
Make
that
the
roadway
improvement.
to a standard that the fire district deems to be safe and accessible.
So what's changed that we now are getting fire districts and water districts trying to explain to us what kind of development is allowed?
I will say that in this case, this is an unusual development. I believe we've only seen one other development that was 2 lots occur on a minimum maintenance roadway in the past ever. And so you're at a property that is adjacent to the city of Basehor, actually borders the city of Basehor, and is on a minimally maintained roadway. So I can't speak to all the points. John would have to speak to some of that, but in this case, it is because of the nature of the roadway that is different than other things that fire district has never reviewed any application like this before. So this is, I would say, it's a case by case as far as the roadway is concerned. Now, in other aspects of development, I'm not speaking to those.
So
John,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Doug. John, you got any comments on this? Because it's taken both of you to do this. I'm just trying to hear everything there is.
Well, I think, and I don't want to put words in the fire chief's
can't
mouth,
hear you,
but I
John.
think the fire chief's intent there was to get an all-weather road to every one of the lots that were out there, and puts Bill in a bit of a situation as to how to approach that. Clearly, it's going to be a policy decision for you guys, what you want to do on these types of roads.
Mhm.
You know what we've done in the past, but moving forward, we need some direction.
So is it true that that would change the cost by about $300,000?
Well, it would certainly change the cost, yes.
So,
But developers
so this
can
is very
pass that along
impactful. This is very impactful.
To the lots.
Did the city of
That's
Basehor,
not our problem.
were they reached out on this plat?
Yes, they
And they're
were.
okay with it?
Yeah,
They don't have
there's-
sewer within
No.
600 feet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, enforcement.
Across the street, there is a force main, but their response to that was not for development. That was part of their comment from their city superintendent.
So
But
they
there
did
is
not
a sewer,
object.
there is a sewer line.
There is a sewer line, but their intention there with the comment was it's not to be hooked in for development.
What's
It's force
it there?
main.
What's it for?
I'm sorry, I couldn't. A force main, what's a force main?
I mean, what's it for if it's not for development?
Well, typically with a force main, you don't have multiple connections.
Right.
You go to a well, and that well is pressurized, and that pressurized element goes back into the force
Put it in a lift
main.
station. Or well,
Potentially,
that well.
but that was their comment for their facilities. But yes, there is a force main across the street.
But they did not object, the city.
Well, again, the city said we do have a sewer there in that area. However, it's not intended for development. So
Right, but they weren't objecting to this.
No, they were not objecting. No. That was the limits of their
Because they
comments.
didn't want to have to worry about
So I
doing the road.
So-
Commissioners, just want to be clear, what we're discussing today is this policy, because as this policy is written, the roadway would have to be improved to standard.
I think I signed it.
So either
Maintain
we
it.
need to amend this policy to allow for what was asked, or we stand by the policy or we amend it some other way.
I
And
stand
think
by the policy.
What Bill was saying is, one of the things that we would like to see amended is that when they have these plats on any road, that it gets reviewed does a study similar to what we do for the commercial SUPs, and that a certain amount of traffic will
Trigger
instigate
that.
a review of the roadways, so that we don't get into a situation where, even though it's just residential, that we have enough cars on that road that then either a bridge is going to have to be problematic or something else.
And how much does that cost?
The traffic study?
Yeah.
Traffic study. it
Yeah,
could be-
typically,
it
how
could
much-
be I mean, I don't bid traffic studies out, so
But I mean, I'm looking at how much cost we're adding to a developer if they have to do
The
that,
developers.
it depends on the nature of
which
the
is
review.
passed on to consumers.
Yeah, it would depend on the nature of the review, whether you have to start looking at bridges and culverts, or whether it would be dependent upon the quality of the roadway you're connecting to. The more lots you put in on a gravel road, the more extensive the review requirement could be.
But there's the ones that aren't developers. They're just individuals
Right, I
that
mean-
want to do it.
well, I
So
mean,
that-
they
they're the
may
ones
have
getting
the
caught.
small guy.
You would have to put a threshold. It would be like the SUPs, where if you wanted to do this, you would name a number of lots or a generated. If you say 2.5 vehicles per house or whatever the industry standard may be, and you would put a number of trips or houses or lots as a requirement that would kick in the review, just like on your SUPs, a certain number of easels on an SUP, then kicks you into a traffic study requirement, and then depending upon the findings of the initial traffic study, you can end up into this, next step scenario.
I don't wanna be in a
This
business of
minimum
building
maintenance
roads for
road, this particular
subdivisions.
plat wouldn't trigger that, though. It's not that many
No,
lots.
it's not that many. It's just
Less than
current
8.
policy
Yeah,
is
less
for a
than 8.
minimum maintenance road is to follow the county's road construction and stormwater standards, which
I have no problem.
includes a hard surface roadway. This does connect to a hard surface roadway. There is not a lesser standard. The other request that we get probably monthly, sometimes it's the same people who just continually call in, but the other request that covers, that this policy is governing, is the extension of existing county roadways that are dead ends, that have a abandoned right-of-way that has not been vacated because it accesses some sort of landlocked property that does not have a residential dwelling on it currently. And we get multiple requests a year to extend existing county roadways within existing county right-of-way in areas that we do not currently maintain. Shawnee Road is an example of that, just west of town, up on top of the hill. It actually goes to a landlocked property, but we do quit maintenance on that. We have another one out by Springdale that I know a couple of the commissioners have been
Tell you,
property.
There's booking pages on a lot of
Yeah,
these old roads. People don't even know it until they sell their property or
And one thing that's
title search.
very unusual about Leavenworth County, when you look at the state of Kansas in general, is a lot of the roadway network that we have in Leavenworth County predates the GFL surveys and the sectionalized lands of Kansas because of the fort. And so we have probably the most roads in the state of Kansas that are dead ends and that are non-sectionalized. So if you go a county north, county west, if you get to Jackson County, Kansas, and Holton, every road is on a section line.
Right.
And so it makes a much cleaner, much easier to maintain roadway network, where we have a lot of old trails, military trails, just trading trails that we followed topography, and they dead end, and they randomly end in some places. We're currently doing the High Prairie Township survey with the survey department, and there are huge swaths of High Prairie Township that have very, very limited road access. And if you look back through the records, they're going to be dead-end roads. Long story short, this policy covers that as well, and it refers you back to the current road construction standards, which is a hard surface roadway. So in the event that a person wants to build a house on one of these roads, it could be a half mile back. The requirement currently is if you're going to make it a county road and you're going to maintain it, you have to hard surface it. Otherwise, depending on the length of the road, the tax revenue that you'll generate from the pulling of the single building permit is not going to pay for the maintenance of the road. So you are subsidizing agricultural or residential development that is not going to pay for the maintenance of the extension of the roadway. Now, if they want to build a driveway within their 20-foot half of the easement for access, albeit access area, that we don't take issue to that. We also would be more than happy to help them get a platted cross-access easement that they privately maintain. But this policy has prevented the Board of County Commissioners from subsidizing at least 10 different locations for roadway extensions.
So on this one plat, they could have took a cross-access easement off 147th Street and came in, correct?
They could have taken
plat, right?
They could have taken a cross-access easement somewhere, probably. I'd have to look at the driveway
I
spacing.
think could have come off 147th.
Yes, it would have come off the hard surface roadway, or they could have just built the interior subdivision roadway. They could have rezoned to R1. There's a lot of, with the location of this property, I think they had a lot of options as far as the roadway goes with an interior development, but I don't believe that's the intention of this developer.
Right.
So it got to us last week, and then we're having this meeting. But apparently, the Planning Commission, or through this process, you were anticipating that we were going to make an exception. Is that how?
Planning Commission made the recommendation for approval.
So we've made 5 exceptions over, I don't know how many years, 5 years or however 6, whatever you signed that.
2019.
So we've made 5 exceptions, and was the Planning Commission aware that there had been so few exceptions made? I mean, that's very few exceptions.
Well, they were aware of the exceptions, yes.
Okay. I just hate for it to get all the way this far along, and then I think this policy makes a lot of sense. So I don't know, maybe occasionally we do make an exception, but I think there has to be an objective criteria for making exceptions.
I think from our perspective in reviewing it, the difference between this application and other applications is the statements made by the fire district.
And I will say that the statement made by the fire district troubles me a little bit, because we're seeming to get these now statements from these additional governing entities that in the past we weren't getting. And
The Kansas City, Missouri
Life safety issues.
news report this morning was they just paid a $4 million settlement for a delayed emergency response.
that's an issue.
No, that's why I said,
That's an issue.
that's a life safety issue. We have to listen to the fire district when they bring that up because there's nothing that prevents the developer from improving the road.
I agree.
Now, does this particular road, will it require additional right-of-way for an improvement?
Yes, the current roadway is a 40-foot right-of-way.
We need 60 on this one. Or is it a section? No.
It's a section.
It's a section that need 80 feet of
I
right-of-way.
believe it would be 80-foot.
Yeah, it'd be 80 foot of right-of-way on that.
Which the property on
would
the
have to
north
be
side of the road
absorbed
is
by
not
us
part of the plat,
eventually.
so
Right.
they would more than likely offset
for-
that right-of-way on the south side of the roadway.
You have to take it all on the south side?
Well, you can't take it from the north side unless the board wanted to,
No, we can't do eminent domain.
unless you wanted to go through the proceedings and purchase that property as part of this.
So, isn't there a gas line on the south side that would get into that 80 foot?
There's a force main for sure. I don't know about a gas line, but the city's force main is on the north side of the
No,
road.
this would be on the south.
Yeah.
Gas line's on the south.
There's a force main on the north, according to the city.
I just hate to leave these to an exception.
47. I don't.
I mean, I understand what you guys are saying, and I agree with Commissioner Cos. You know, if it's a developer, they'll just pass it on. That's not an issue. But what I want to look out for to be development friendly is the family member that wants to build on the family farm, happens to be down a minimum maintenance road. If they sign an affidavit, I don't see an issue with like a lawsuit. If they agree that they're saying, hey, we understand.
I think there's a difference between a subdivision development and an individual trying to do something with their family.
But
I mean,
this catches
it's-
those individuals.
Yeah,
and
I don't know.
That's
What
what
I'm-
they
what I'm
say
saying.
Subdivision sometimes.
Yeah.
But if it's a family,
And as long as
We
the
haven't made
exceptions
that
are
many
working.
exceptions. We've only made 5 exceptions.
Yeah.
I just think that we're asking that section of road.
I mean, what if we passed it where we said 1, and
I
if they
just
sign
don't-
the affidavit waiving our responsibility?
I don't think we can
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, that's,
When it has
But
been
then
brought
they-
to us that there's a life safety issue,
Yeah.
I don't think we can
This house up here.
why
or
not?
should,
As soon
or
as
just
they
because we
got in,
can,
they
should
called
we?
for
I mean,
compliance.
So can we approach the fire, I mean, maybe this young man that's working on this development can approach the fire department and say, can we bring it up to a safety standard that provides for fire protection short of hard
That-
surfacing the road?
violates our
violates
policy.
your
That
Well, I
violates
mean,
our
that would be
policy.
our exception we would make. I mean, that
Well-
would be an exception.
And that's why we're asking you either to amend the policy to
I
allow
don't
for
want to
something
amend the
like that,
policy.
so that we're not looking at these onesies, twosies as an
But
exception.
county would still have to take it over as maintenance.
And that's the thing. So if you don't pass the expense on to the developer, you're taking it on as
Right, in which I don't.
because it will eventually become our problem. It's county right of way.
Exactly.
So when you get those developments, that's why the policy
They're
is
making
in
it a
place
problem.
so that the developer picks up the expense,
Right.
not the county as a whole.
But you're catching the people that aren't going through developers and subdivisions.
Well, I think that's why it's allowed for a private driveway for the one-off type. You can put a private drive in.
So that's the
This is-
workaround.
This
is-
is getting, well, that's already allowed.
Yeah, that's what I'm
This is
saying.
getting to the point of, now you have, this will be 6 houses on this road.
I get it.
So,
The workaround is private driveway, and that's what we've been doing.
and that policy allows for 2 on a private drive.
Right.
You can't-
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, the bigger issue for the fire chief, according to his comments, is an all-weather road. Doesn't mean that all-weather road has to be located in the road right away. The developer could work out a deal with the fire chief to accommodate that road location in another area, and then it would be maintained privately versus publicly.
Is there a hard definition for all-weather road? Because the last
There is a
time I
code
looked at it,
definition, yes.
'cause
We got a letter in 1954 from the county engineer that was going to try to get Leavenworth County an all-weather road.
don't know who being made
by
into
a
our
certain
problem.
year.
So you can actually look at the definition in the 06 IFC. and-
I mean, it's basically just a gravel driveway.
Well, it's acceptable to the fire chief in essence
Well,
for the condition. But
from an-
if it's outside the,
That would be
outside of the road,
the
right,
public right of way.
right.
inside the public right of way, what I've included in your packet is the minimum design standards. Often it comes up federal highway, low volume gravel road standards. So it took a extensive amount of research in order to nail down exactly where these standards, how they would apply and how they would have to be referenced. And so actually, the Federal Highway put out a document to say what criteria must be met in order to apply a 2001 AASHTO standard for very low volume roadways, which almost every roadway in Leavenworth County, every gravel roadway except for maybe a handful or fewer would qualify as very low volume because they consider it as a federal government 400 vehicles a day.
That's the AASHTO guideline you're talking about?
Yeah, 400 vehicles a day or less fall under a very low volume.
You know how tough it is to maintain a gravel road that's got 400 cars a day on it?
Exactly.
Kansas State.
It's pretty tough.
Kansas State has put out literature and studies that state that you shouldn't, at the point that a gravel road reaches 200 vehicles a day, your crash severity is up by 67%, I believe, and at that point, the maintenance of that roadway as gravel is no longer a feasible option, and it should be looked at for hard surface.
I'm saying,
But we can't put a threshold of pain on traffic count because there's no way we could budget for that. Even though we got roads that are over the threshold of pain.
Yeah, it would be upside
claim
down.
that the property owners won't care if that is what they have to live with until it happens.
Then you get the calls.
So back to the planning commission on this. Was this thoroughly covered as far as discussion of the roadway?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and the discussion was that well, they've made exceptions in the past, or what was the argument?
I think the precedent was that the affidavit has been used in the past, and that was the intent of the developer currently, that if you build on this road with a plat restriction on the face of the plat, if you build on this road, you're going to sign an affidavit before the building permit would be issued.
But they were made aware that
Yes.
is strictly an exception.
That has been the practice, yes.
But it is a exception from the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, that they were made aware of that situation, yes. It
And
wasn't a
we've only
variance.
done
It
We've only
wasn't.
done it 5 times, so I mean, I don't know if
I don't think it
that
was a
These don't come up a
subdivision,
lot.
is it?
They had
What?
I don't know if
It
that
was for
gentleman
subdivision.
knew that
No.
this
That's
is
my
not
point.
not
I mean,
automatic.
that's none of them. For the
Okay.
purpose of
You know what I'm
facilitating
saying?
subdivision.
Right.
And
I mean,
it gets all the way up to us, and he
No,
maybe
wait,
thinks
it-
this is automatic.
We don't end up with the phone calls.
So maybe we
Not
do need
me,
a-
but you guys.
We have a policy, but maybe we need to make it more specific. I don't know.
Well, I think we've had a lot of conversations about SUPs, exceptions in the past. Policy is a good one,
It is a good
but we have
policy.
to follow it.
That's right.
It's when we grant exceptions that we look for, okay, what's wrong
And I
with
always
this
say
policy
that.
that we need to amend it. So what we're looking for today is, does the board want to follow this policy or amend the policy? We prefer not to have the exceptions. We prefer to follow the policy.
We'll follow the
Obviously,
policy.
It makes it a lot easier for staff to know when to apply and when not to apply.
Follow
But
the
if you're
policy.
not going
I
to
think I know
follow,
how
we'd
you
ask that
feel.
you give us some guidance on how you'd like to amend it.
Anybody know off the top of their head how many denials we've had for people that tried to get an exception?
I couldn't hear you, Jeff, I'm sorry.
Do we know off the top of our head how many exceptions were asked for but denied? I can't think of any.
I'm not aware of any denial that I've covered.
Yeah, and 5 years isn't, I mean, 1 a year to me isn't worth changing policy for, I
And
don't
they weren't
think.
for the same request. I mean, a similar.
Wasn't
They were
planned.
right.
Yeah,
They were unique, and it's like we talk about sometimes the rules that Topeka passes doesn't apply equitably across the state. You can use that argument in some of these cases as well. When you're talking about a roadway that's about 4 miles from the city limits, and you're putting one house in there, it's completely different than one that's right next to the fastest growing area of the county. Which one are we more likely to have to improve at some point because of the increased traffic? Well, the one right next to the city, we're likely going to get stuck with improvements on, whereas I'll just use Jeff's area, like by Easton, like a mile from Easton. The county likely will not deal with improving that roadway because of that development at any time soon.
I mean, I can see changing policy if you get a lot of exceptions or a lot of denials for exceptions, but
But
really,
you were saying you would recommend one change, Bill, and that was if there were anything changed.
If you were wanting to look at this policy and you were going to open it up for any amendments, one thing that you could consider is if you wanted to put a threshold at the size of a development that would allow or would make a requirement for a traffic study to be completed. If you guys wanted to look at the impact on a roadway network adjacent to, say, I'll use Garden Villas, for instance. Recently, it's a 48-lot subdivision on gravel. And so we did not, from a public works review perspective, do a off-site roadway review of the subdivision. So I didn't know if you were going to open this policy up for revisions, that would be one thing that in 2021 you had provided direction that you were interested in that for residential development. We were going to stick with SUPs. But if you wanted us to, we would be happy to follow whatever direction you provided us to.
So if we proceed, we leave the policy in place, then the question is if the gentleman can resolve his differences with the fire department, and then he can still come and ask for an exception if he was able to reach a accommodation.
If he accommodates the fire chief
It's not
and
the
you
same.
hear the final plat, you make
Right.
the,
It's
you
not the
either
same.
accept,
Then we could.
The exception did
you
not-
accept or deny
It's-
the planning
the
commission's
circumstances of the
recommendation
exceptions
for
that have been
approval, or
granted.
you
because it's
modify.
a life save.
No,
So-
not only that, well, that's one, but
And
it's
after
also
that,
the difference
the
in
assumption is that we
the
would move
plat. I
forward
mean,
with
and
the
it's for a
affidavit as
subdivision
has been
versus
done
an
in the past.
individual looking for
So if we didn't have
an exception to
This-
build a home
this,
on a
fire
40 acres.
issue, then this would have proceeded to just the board deciding if we're going to grant an exception.
Well, yeah, logically, that would have been the, that would have
Well,
been the
that's
case.
what happened anyways.
Yeah.
It came
Right, so
before-
that's what I'm saying is if he has a discussion with the fire chief says, well, you don't really need to hard surface the whole thing, but if you did X, Y, Z, and that would make it where we could deliver safety
No, because
service.
the fire
Well, we gotta
district
take it
cannot
over.
provide a waiver to our policy.
And we
I'm
can't.
not asking him to do that, but what I'm saying is, if he said that if this road had rock, or if this road had, then it would meet the ability of us to deliver
five.
services.
Well, I think that would-
But that goes.
The only people that can waiver our policy
And
is
there's already
us.
5.
But what I'm
There's
saying
several
is, he
already
could
existing.
have-
Could it be accommodated by the fire,
Right.
could he accommodate the fire chief in an alternate method other than the road right of way? It is possible. But
So
again, it
that's
doesn't
what
affect
I'm
the
saying.
policy
Road right.
that we're putting before you today.
I would caution the board allowing public improvements to be made by developers that were not signed off on by a licensed engineer.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be, the fire chief does not have the design expertise necessary to protect the interests of the county in order to
We've been
ensure that the public
advised
safety
that there is a
met.
life
That's
safety
the-
issue.
That's the policy that you currently have, so if they said, we would service this if you sprinkled 4 inches of gravel down yearly, that is fine, but that doesn't meet any standard of care. So if you don't want to violate your own policy, if you want to hold your policy to a standard,
Well, if we're granting an exception to our policy, we're granting an exception to our
yeah,
policy.
but you have to name what that
But-
exception is.
John said
We're
something
not-
about off right away. So are you talking like a frontage road?
I'm talking about an all-access road that is irrespective of the vehicular traffic that you're talking about. All-access road is simply for the purposes of fire protection. It happens all the time, and it's defined by the code.
Be
The
like
code.
a frontage road off.
Essentially, it could be
It is,
accommodated.
yeah.
There are a number of ways you could accommodate it that don't deal with the road right away. But again, that's a piece. Yeah.
But the result of us sticking to the policy, just to make it, come down to Reelsville here, is he's going to have to put a $300,000 hard surface road in.
That's what staff is
Well,
asking.
that's-
We're asking for
That's
direction.
1,600 feet would cost that?
Well, that's what the estimate I was given. So you're adding substantial. Well, that's what I.
How many
They
houses?
require 40 feet of right of way.
Oh, that's right. You got to get
Probably going
additional
to
right
have to
away.
move utilities.
Relocate utilities.
But how many houses was this asking for? 5?
6. Well, there's 6 lots total.
So
The 6 new lots?
Yeah, and there's 3
4 new
existing on
lots.
the opposite side.
And how many are already existing on this?
So if he can come in accommodation with the fire chief and then come and ask for an exception, that's
But
different.
how does the fire chief make it? I mean, we've had pointed out to us that there is a life safety issue with this. That does not absolve us.
Yeah, I think the problem I'm having, I don't disagree with what's going on.
If there was a way
Mike,
short
hold
of
on just a second.
$300,000
Mike,
road.
I think what the problem is that the fire chief, you're saying that he can say the road is not safety, but yet then when you come back and say, well, the fire chief can okay it, but now he's not. But now he's not an expert. I mean, you can't have it both ways. I agree we need to fix this, but if the fire chief's going to come in and say you can't drive down this road for whatever reason is, then he's acting like an expert. But yet when we ask the question the other way, then you're making it sound like, well, no, we can't use the fire chief's thing because he's not the expert.
But I think when you've had vehicles that have been stuck, I think that when we've had a history on that patch of road where vehicles have been stuck due to weather conditions that have occurred on that stretch of road where like a UPS truck stuck, they had to be pulled out, that then you're not going to be able to have an apparatus if it snows, or because we have plenty of gravel roads that we've had our emergency vehicles accidentally get stuck on. So we have to be careful.
Our
when
minimum
we're-
maintenance does not
Right.
have snow removal. at all.
Right, but then
I
still
mean, the
slushy,
county does,
gooey
when they
mess.
get to it, eventually, after all the roads are open and all that, they will go over there. And a lot of times the snow's melting by then.
Yeah.
Right, but and then when they're
But it is not
it's-
a
but then
top
it's a-
priority.
Our
But then
minimum
getting
maintenance
through it
roads
isn't-
are in fairly decent shape in comparison to what most municipalities consider minimum maintenance roads.
'Cause we use
Our
asphalt
budget,
millings.
if our budget does not allow for us to buy asphalt millings, there is, which has been sprinkled on there in the past, there is zero requirement for the county to provide any
Right.
surfacing material at all.
The only reason they got asphalt millings is they were free at one time.
just concerned
Until they
that-
started pushing all the recycling.
I don't
wanna start
disagree. I
this.
don't disagree.
And so,
with you. I'm just-
as
Even in
those
the
asphalt
future,
millings
for other
deteriorate,
I just don't like the
there
way it's
isn't
going both ways.
per
And
county
you're an
policy.
expert, and then you're not an expert when you ask that
be
question.
Violating the county policy by
Purchasing.
purchasing a bunch of material to put down on there. These are, the way the policy is written in the state statute, I believe, kind of corresponds to this. These are determined by the Board of County Commissioners.
This is good as it gets right there.
They-
Would be
the way
just
the
a
policy is
desk, Chair.
written, they're intended for agricultural purposes, for maintenance twice a year during planting and before harvest. Generally, that's why there's a twice a year requirement in order to get crops in and out.
I think you're still looking for direction. We've gone all over this thing 100 times. And Mark, that's what your only thing you need, right, is direction. Chair, I think we beat this to death.
Yeah, it sounds like the consensus of the board is not to make a change to policy. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Ba-da-ba.
Tell me we're through, Chair.
Anything else we need to talk about?
Mike, don't say a
It's
word.
not on our work
If not,
session.
I say the meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Thank you very much.